Welcome to Magical Aspirations, a podcast for magical people where we aspire to gather all of the knowledge magic has to offer, a place to illuminate and demystify all things magical. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to Magical Aspirations. I am joined today with, of course, my lovely co-host, Miss Reverend Raven.
Caca.
And Annalisa.
Hello.
And today we are continuing our business witchery series, and we have a beautiful, phenomenal guest here. She is hailing from California, and she is such a powerhouse in what she does. She is so talented and well-spoken, has a podcast called Catalyst. She does crystal jewelry, and she hosts a number of container sessions and retreats that center BIPOC healing and safety for entrepreneurs and other healers. So without further ado, Nike, welcome to Magical Aspirations.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Yes. So Nike, we start off everybody with the same question, and we have to know, what are your magical aspirations?
I think my magical aspirations in this phase that I'm in is just embracing all humanness. I think a lot of times we want to get away from humanness because we don't think it's magical, but I think it's actually so magical. And it's just an experience that I think, especially when you're in the spiritual space, we kind of forget how to really uphold it and uplift it. But I do see more and more people are like centering humanness and showing everyone how magical it is. But yeah, that's where I am in my phase of life right now.
I support the mission. And that makes me curious. What's your sun sign?
I'm a Taurus.
Grounding in that earth. I love it.
That's not surprising. Yeah, so I'm definitely like earthly. Like I love earth, which is so interesting to say because most people are like, forget earth, which I totally get. But I'm also like, wait, there's a specific reason why we're probably here. And yeah. And I also feel like the more that you're like saying like, I hate earth, I never want to come back, this is too much, then you're probably going to come back. So
please.
That is the truth.
I am here for that. So Nike, what are you studying right now?
Right now I'm really studying how to be more inclusive and like throughout different identities and marginalizations. And I always say, because the work I do is really just supporting all different humans with an intersectional view, which is outside of the scope of diversity. I think diversity is different identities in the same space, but if there's no intersectionality, if there's no intentional inclusivity, then it's just different identities in the same space. So I'm really studying and really focusing in my personal, but also in my business, of being more intersectional throughout the whole broads of identities, which means though getting away from black and white thinking, that there's lots of nuances, lots of different thoughts of understanding, and not one identity is going to be the same depending on the person. So a whole spiel of stuff.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. And I think it's so important, especially the fact that you're coming at it from a spiritual perspective is really, first of all, necessary. But also just based on some of the experiences that I've had in some of these previous healing spaces that I was a part of were very triggering to me as a Black person in a spiritual breaking out of Christianity. Like it was a lot. So I can't even imagine what you have encountered on top of what you've also had to teach and redirect. So how do you take care of yourself in the midst of all of the work that you do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I feel like it changes. The answer changes every
Fair.
week.
That's fair.
But the space I'm in right now, I think first of all, I was like you kind of mentioned it with your experience. Just I found myself in a lot of spiritual spaces where I was definitely healing, but I was also getting re-traumatized in other ways.
Mm,
And so it was really frustrating to me that I was investing in these containers and my healing wasn't valued completely, or there were parts of my identity that were completely ignored or bypassed. So um, I kind of transitioned to doing ancestral healing and ancestral work, which is such a gift. And I became more ancestral led, which then led me to, well, if I don't want to constantly get hurt, then I should just create containers where I don't get hurt, which is actually a lot.
like period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the way that I chose to take care of myself,
Mm,
because I knew that I still wanted to be in these spaces or spaces like where I was receiving the positive sides of the healing, but I just no longer wanted to be re-traumatized, or I didn't want to be exposed to it without me getting paid for it, basically. Like, and then I'm gonna
yeah.
get checked.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah. That's
Respect.
how, yeah. If I'm going to invest in these containers, they better be 100% there for me, or you're paying me to teach you how to do it.
Mm.
So that really leads me to a question, that how did you make this your business? Like, what kind of business model do you have to do this kind of teaching?
Yeah, so my business is very it's been an evolution. Really I was focusing on ancestral healing, but then I realized how ancestral healing is just so connected, and generational hurts and traumas are so intersectional with everything else that we are connecting to just in this world. Like even outside of spirituality, we see generational trauma in our school system, we see it in our medical field, we see it just around the scope. And every single human being probably has generational wounds or trauma, and also ancestral gifts and inheritance. So that was really the basis. I was like, are these spiritual spaces considering their generational traumas as they're healing and they're connecting with other people? Like, are they considering the ancestral history? Because I think sometimes that does come into play when we are healing in community or we're trying to build community. And so, really, with my consulting, I was like, okay, how can we focus on the community and creating safer spaces while also acknowledging not only the generational traumas of the space that might occur or the generational understandings, but also of the healers who are holding that space and maybe not conscious how that might play into their interaction with the different people that they're trying to serve and work with.
Mhm. Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, that's big. And
Yeah.
do you think that this is what you're sticking with now? Do you feel it shifting even more as you've embodied this business?
Um, yeah. So also, I'm a Scorpio rising, which
Love that.
yeah. So I'm constantly like death, rebirth, death, rebirth.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, right now I feel like I am really not maybe in the bulk of the embodiment, but like almost there. I'm also a
Mm.
special education teacher. So a lot of what I do in education, I have my master's in education, I have two teaching credentials, is what I apply in my coaching and consulting spaces. So they're
Okay.
all intersected. When I go to a professional development for my students and how to support. Like I just went to a conference that was talking about the different ACEs. I don't know if y'all know what that is. Yeah, for childhood adversity and how that plays into the spaces that we create in this educational space. Then that instantly applies to my business because it's literally the same thing. It's just different containers.
Yeah.
And so I feel like because it's really intersected in like all aspects of my life that I am like reaching into the bulk of it. But I feel like I also have so much more to learn. And I think that's also part of this and part of why I do this is like there's always, I want people to be okay with the idea that you're always going to learn. You're never gonna know everything. Getting away from the perfectionism that is just like a pillar of white supremacy.
Preach. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's really important that we always just remain students of life because there's so many cool things that we can keep learning. And whenever we meet people where they're at, like you said, with the intersectionality, I think that we can all continue to learn. And whenever we think that we have all of the answers, that arrogance is what hurts other people.
Yeah, definitely. And it really hurts ourselves too, because once you make a mistake, then you're not gracious with yourself and then you're scared. A lot of what I do too is like during May, around April, May, I had an influx of clients because there were a lot of people who were getting quote unquote canceled on social media. And there's like such a fear of cancellation, I think also, especially in the white space, because there's just like this hesitation to be wrong, this hesitation to take accountability when you feel like your intentions weren't bad. And I really want to get away from that because the thing is, we have been socialized to be a part of any ism, right? We've been socialized to be racist, we've been socialized to be prejudiced, we've been socialized to be ableist, so many things. And so if we don't understand that, okay, we were actually raised within these systems and these thought processes, and that's also where the generational wounds come in too, that could play a huge effect and role in like how you're thinking about things and how you're approaching the things. Then if we don't accept that, then we'll never be able to do better after it because we're getting so wound up in, again, the perfectionism of it all. So yeah, it's just we're not perfect and it's okay.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. I think you touched on something so important around like being canceled and being wrong, fear of being wrong. And I think that it really like physically, somatically, it does a lot of harm to us to like swallow that type of emotion and consistently be working through that. And how even just thinking about ways how when you're feeling shame and guilt, it shows up in the stomach, it shows up in your throat, or maybe you end up having a headache or some sort of thing. And it just is, I appreciate the work that you do because it touches on so many different aspects. And of course, just bringing back that intersectionality and how the spiritual work isn't just the woo woo, the reading the cards, the lighting the candles. No, this is like work. This is life work that you're doing.
It really is. And I have to just really give you a moment of just thank you for the work that you do, because as a white woman who has had to do a lot of unlearning from a lot of really bad conditioning, like I like exactly like Adriana's saying, like I'm feeling a lot of unprepared like emotional release happening right now. Like I feel it in my heart and like in my chest. Like it's really important what you're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just really want to create spaces that like it's okay. I really value community, and I think because we value, especially in the Western world, or just capitalism too, values individualism, that that's why it makes it feel so much harsher because we're not a part of these communities, like these authentic communities that are a lot of our ancestors or a lot of BIPOC ancestors were a part of, to create spaces where to just allow and like allow these emotions and these feelings to just work through, but knowing that you're held in community. So that's also what I try to kind of bring in vibrationally, because I know it's like it's going to be a long time to do that, like just like in general with like actual
Facts.
humans. Yeah.
And we can't, like, individually, we cannot heal everything in like 2 hours or some shit like that. Like it's gonna take time. It's gonna take time and community, like you were saying. Wow. I just have to say, like, I remember coming onto your podcast. Was that last year?
Yeah. It must have been last summer.
Last summer. Yeah. Something. Yeah. Which feels like literally a whole lifetime ago. And to just see, I feel like you were really graceful then, but this Nike that I'm talking to now is just like, she is confident. She's like, yeah, this is what I do.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so nice to hear.
Of course. So getting into like what you do for your business on the spiritual, like what type of, like, is it meditations? Do you divine? Like what kind of things do you do for your business that are a little bit of woo-woo?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, I'm pretty ancestral led. So, everything I do right now really centers my ancestors. I feel like that's why they put me into this work. So like I have my ancestral altar. I get into community with them. I don't meditate. Well, okay, I don't traditionally meditate. I also neurodivergent ADHD. It does not work for me.
I feel that 100%. Yep.
That's so glad to hear. Like when I first started getting into the spiritual space, everything was meditation. I was just like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I can't do this. I'm not going to find inner peace. But
a bitch cannot sit still. Like,
Yes. So actually my quote unquote meditation is usually just like walking or like even just at the gym, like weightlifting. That's where I find like I'm just like really calm, but also there's not so many things distracting me. So I just realized that like maybe 4 months ago, like that's how my ancestors were helping me quote unquote meditate or just like have pause. So I do that with them. But also it is, I think a lot of my spiritual, what kind of ignites the spiritual side of my business is again being community with my ancestors, but also connecting with the ancestors who, well, it's actually really, it's weird and magical how it arises, but like connecting with the ancestors who just like show up, working with them a little bit and then channeling it. Like I recently found out the last year, well, since I did ancestral healing, I found out that actually on my maternal side, they were actually Afro-Brazilian. So I always thought like, yeah, I always thought that we were West African because my parents just came from West Africa. And I figured, you know, they weren't taken anywhere because they were originally there. But it turns out they were. So on my mom's side, they were taken to Brazil and they were enslaved. And then there was 5 revolutions. And one of the ancestors went back to West Africa.
Okay.
And so then throughout that, there's just been so many change makers on that line. Then I found out that I had a uncle, or my grandma's uncle was the president of Togo. I didn't know that.
What?
Yeah.
Casual.
No idea. So then because I found that out, I found myself communicating with him. So I feel like right now, a lot of the work I'm doing is in relation with that, because his biggest thing was he wanted to separate because a lot of countries in Africa are still paying a tax to their
Right.
colonizer.
Yep.
So his main thing was that he wanted to separate the currency from like the French currency to have their own African currency. And then he got assassinated because he was doing that. So I feel like a lot of the work I'm doing right now is like him pushing me to get in these uncomfortable spaces and like say these things, but also heal the fear around saying things, because that was definitely a generational wound. And so then that relates back into the coding of my business now, because even like 2 years ago, I don't think I would talk the way I talk on my social media now about white supremacy and like all these things. So yeah.
That, damn. And you said that was all just on your maternal side?
Yeah, and then my paternal side, that's a whole other thing.
Wow, man, this is why ancestral work is so important, because there is just buckets, books, lifetimes of, like you said, wisdom, gifts, and wounds on all sides. Wow.
That's insane. That's so, I appreciate the amount of detail in that. I have recently started to do a lot of ancestral digging on my side, and like that's ancestor envy for knowing that much. That's really cool.
Yeah, and to be honest, it all just like nobody told like when I started doing ancestral work, nobody told me. Like bits and pieces of information would flow out from like my parents or like my family, but it really was my own physical research, but also intuitive. So I always tell people too that our ancestry is so vast that you're not necessarily going to know everything, but they will drop clues and hints once you start becoming curious. Like the Afro-Brazilian thing, it was my own research. It was me like Google translating some things and like some French, and then like confirming a couple things with like my parents, but like then like it's really that I taught my mom, for example, like the whole history and everything that happened. Like she didn't know. So yeah, I just always encourage like people who are just starting, like it will, like the pieces will come together more and more. Even if you feel like you know your ancestry, like I mentioned before, I thought I knew it, and it turns out I knew nothing. So they will drop hints and clues to you, and they will like lead you to the right spaces, which I think is just such a blessing. So yeah.
Yeah, that's 100% true.
That is so cool. And basically, the knowledge that you have of your ancestry is because of your own hard work and listening to your intuition. I think that's a really good learning experience. And it brings me to a question. Are there parts of your ancestors' traditions that you follow from a spiritual path?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's also really interesting because of like colonialism and colonization, right? Like a lot of African countries, right? They participate, they're like either Christian or they are Muslim. There are some who are Jewish. And like they're so fearful still, or like there's such a hesitation of the indigenous ancestral spiritualities and religions that our ancestors participated in. So I would say that I'm in the middle. Like I grew up Catholic. There's definitely I don't have any religious trauma, which is interesting because I find that a lot of people have a lot of religious trauma. But so I do still use like a couple of things from that. But then in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, but this was like the colonizers' religion sometimes. So like they sometimes use some concepts to manipulate my ancestors. So then I find myself in between the indigenous practices of spirituality that my ancestors did, like shell work. I know that I had some ancestors who read shells. So I try to keep that in the mind. I also do altar work. And I just think, especially in African and West African culture, always honoring your elders and your ancestors are just a huge part of the culture. So I feel like that's really connected to the spirituality of it all too. Um, and then I would also say something that I feel like was very spiritual that my ancestors did was just like any work with herbs, which I also think was descended from like my mom has like a green thumb, like she can grow so many things. But whether that's like making tea and being in community with them, um, making oils that have herb. I've also went back to like doing the cleansing of my ancestors. So I don't use like sage really, but I use eucalyptus. That's something that my ancestors use. I use Palo Santos from like the Brazilian side.
Yeah.
Yeah, like subtle things like that because where my parents are from, that's actually where voodoo originated. Um, and I don't know if I could get all into that. Like, it's very intense, right? Like, you have to be initiated. I
You
don't even
do.
know if I'm allowed, actually. So
Yeah. True.
I'm not fully in it, but I take elements of like the things that I know they've participated in or that just like naturally come to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. I think that that's really interesting how you're able to kind of mix those practices and continue learning, like continue to be open about that. I was blessed to spend 6 months in Brazil studying Afro-Brazilian culture in Salvador, and I heard you mention Afro-Brazilian cultures, and immediately, started thinking about what specific practices that maybe you incorporated. But I found it really interesting when you're mentioning about, some of the things was, the traditions, based from colonization. So we change the names of the things and their syncretism. And, you're going to revere this saint instead of this, Orisha.
Mm-hmm.
So there is like a lot of that in the background of it too, that, obviously you need to pay attention to and see what parts resonate with you. Is that a good way to think about it?
Yeah, that's so true. And now you're like making something click for me. So, like, even growing up Catholic, I would always connect with saints more. So
Mhm.
like the saint, what was like, there's like Saint Cecilia of music, Saint Anthony. So I'd always connect with saints and speak to saints more than actual like Mary, God, Jesus. Like there was a disconnection sometimes.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so that definitely makes sense. I remember now, yes, it's very connected to like the Orishas. Um, and even like goddesses, I did a lot of goddess work. So like when I found out I was working with Aphrodite a lot, and I feel like Aphrodite
Mhm.
is really connected, can be really connected to Ocean, but also Yamaya. So
Yeah. Mhm.
when I
Mhm.
found that connection, I was just like, oh, this makes sense. And I instantly switched because it felt more aligned. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Hmm.
Yes. So now I'm a little curious now. You mentioned let me get my thoughts together. Okay, so you mentioned about the shells, and that immediately I'm like, yes, tell me more. Because I don't really have too many people around me who do shell work. I have a couple of bone folks, and some other indigenous, but not shell. So do you work with water spirits a lot as well?
Actually, now you're making me think. Maybe I do. No. Okay, this is so shells are a recent thing.
Okay, okay.
Um, but so I like 2 months ago, I bought shell jewelry. I was just really
Mm,
drawn to it. And I wear like shells every day, whether it's like a ring or this necklace that I have. And then recently I had an aunt. See, it's just like random people who come. An aunt who
mhm.
came to visit us, and she was like, I was kind of telling her a little bit what I do. And she's like, yeah, on our family side, you have a great grandfather, or yeah, a great great grandfather who was an oracle for the kingdom of Dahomey. And I was like, yeah,
Mm.
I did know that. And she's like, and she looks at the shells and she's like, yeah, he used the shells to do his divination work. And I'm like, oh.
Well,
That is so cool.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, okay. And then a lot of things came popping up where like I realized that shells have been a huge symbol within my spirituality. Like the first time I got my energy centers read, we were in a park. It was a really great experience. And there was a shell on the floor, and I still have that shell now. And when I was younger, we would go to the beach. We would always collect shells. I mean, I think a lot of little kids do. But then also the connection with the water is really interesting. My mom, she grew up not knowing how to swim, even though she was born on the water. And so her siblings, I think they don't know how to swim. However, she thought it was really important for my sister and I to learn. So we'd always be in water, and I would even go into the ocean water and open my eyes underwater, which is crazy.
Crazy, but I've done it. I feel you.
Yeah, because I want to see like everything. Like I want to see the plants in the water, the bottom of the sand, all these things. And I've always been like even yesterday I made a video how I needed like a sensory relief. So I was taking a spray bottle and just spraying myself with water. So it's been really recent connecting to the shells. But I like have them on my altar, and I'm just waiting for them to tell me what to do. I don't really know.
Okay. Oh, I'm so excited for you.
I can actually relate to that very, very hard. I went to California a couple of months ago, and I literally collected a purse full of shells from the beach, and they've just been like sitting in my little witchy closet, and like I look at them every day, and they're like, not yet. And I'm like, okay, but when? I want to play with you, but like they keep telling me it's not time. So, who knows?
That's how it was with my bone set. Like I had them on my altar for a full year before I actually picked them up and was like, okay, I'm ready. But now that I use them, they're like, bitch, put down those cards and pick up the bones.
Come touch my bone right over here.
I love that. So maybe you're going to have some water spirits that are going to make themselves known to you, and before you start really practicing with those shells, which is huge.
Maybe. And there is a generational wound around especially, I'm getting chills, but there's like a fear around mermaids. Growing up, my mom hated mermaids. Once I remember I bought a shirt from Target that had like, I'm a mermaid on it. And she was like, you need to return that right now. She hates Starbucks. She hates Starbucks. She hates the photo because she's like, that is a mermaid. So
that is wild.
There's definitely some fear around it. So I'm just like, okay, I wonder where this is going to go. What chapter is this going to go into?
What is that going to unfold? I have read some of the stories that like Jamaican people and even some like Afro-Brazilian people have, in the stories they have about mermaids. I'm like, oh my fucking gosh, this is wild.
They're definitely a different kind of mermaid than the Disney depiction. For sure.
And this is not Ariel.
I resonate hard with that. I actually have a painting of a vampire mermaid on my wall in my living room that I'm in love with. But on my end, I announced last week that I don't fucking swim because I'm scared of water. So
you did say that. And here we are.
Something to do with it.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting too? Because my parents are francophones, so they speak French. So she doesn't say mermaid, but she says sirene, which is siren. I wonder, like, it's just what the difference is. I think in French they don't have a word for mermaid. It's just
that. I can't wait. We're gonna have to have an episode about that.
I'm literally making a note about it right now.
I was gonna say I believe in some of the interpretations. La Sarine is Yemaya as well.
Yes, she is. Yeah. And she seems so chill. So I'm like, okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, water is a force to be reckoned with. So you
that is true.
Fuck with water.
That is the truth.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So Nike, what do you have coming up in the future for your business?
Yeah, so right now I'm really focusing on my consulting, so just helping businesses become safer and more inclusive, especially for Black and Indigenous femme and women plus healing.
Mm,
Teaching them how to center that healing, because a lot of what we do is white centered. Even if we're not white, we've just been socialized to produce
absolutely.
things that way.
Mm, mhm,
Um, so right now I have a program called Sustainable and Inclusive, because also I think in order to do this work, it has to be sustainable. We can't
Yes.
be, first of all, you can't do it all at once.
Mm-hmm.
If you want
Mm-hmm.
it to have longevity, and it's like also a lifelong process. So I kind of help people get into the mindset of doing it, but also start implementing green flags in their business to make
mm,
sure that others see that it is a safe space, and then eradicate the red flags and support their mindset. So,
Mm,
yeah.
Well, that makes me wonder, are there some tactics or practices that folks who want to get into a spiritual business that they can do before they even, like open shop?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think the number one thing is just invest in your education, like
Mm,
whether it's time, money, whatever. And the sense of, if you're curious about something, go to a workshop. There's so many free workshops,
mm,
um, and there's so many paid workshops as well. But there's just a plethora of workshops from the people that it centers their identity to learn
mm,
from. So if you want to do retreats, for example, and you want to do it for like women plus, um, think about, who are you envisioning at your retreat? Are you envisioning
mm,
different identities, or are you envisioning just one identity? And if you're just envisioning one identity, why? Are you envisioning Black women plus because they need a sacred space to heal and come into community because of the shit that we have to deal with? Or
mhm,
are you envisioning white women plus because that's all that you've been thinking about? So, like,
mm,
really understanding your mindset and understanding where it comes from. If it's stemming from like centering because I want them to heal, centering because they need a space, or is it centering because that's just the norm and the default, and that's just what I think of when it comes to this thing? And
mm.
then going to a workshop to kind of help you unpack that and unlearn that if you can't fully invest in any consultation or deprogramming with a coach.
I like that.
Ooh, that leads me to a
Mhm.
question. Can businesses get involved with you? Like, you could be a consultant for a business to help them understand how to make things more inclusive and not just for individuals?
So yeah, right now I only work with businesses.
Okay, okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I misunderstood.
No, I didn't make that clear. Yeah, right now I only work with businesses. I don't just work with individuals.
Mhm.
Because yeah, I feel like it's like we work within the individual within the business, because your business is such a reflection of you. So
Right,
yeah.
Ashe,
right.
ashe. 100%.
And a lot of times there is, just one or two people though making those decisions that impact the entire business. So, like the event planner that's planning the retreat, for example, their mindset is the one that's going to put together that event. So, it's important to work with those individuals within the business that are those change makers.
Yes, exactly. Like working with the people who are making the decisions for the containers that they're holding.
Mm,
Yes.
mm,
How
mm.
cool.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
And then oh, go ahead, Annalisa.
I was just gonna say it's making me have like a visual of like a Ponzi scheme, but in like such a good way. Like I don't want to even degrade what you're doing by comparing it to a Ponzi scheme, but like just think of it like a triangle, right? So like you go to the business and then like hopefully the messages that you're spreading about like making the business more inclusive will like help people who like even just the conversation we're having today, I'm starting to really like visualize some things that like I didn't even realize that maybe I was doing to not be super inclusive. But then like all of those people go and they spread that message. So like hopefully if you work with a business of 5 or 6 people, they'll take your message and spread it to 5 or 6 more people, and so on and so forth. And hopefully like that makes a good ripple effect to really send out what you're trying to do into the world.
Yeah, exactly. Or any collaborations that they do, because they're really like lifelong skills. And it's also just understanding too, you can't always acquire a perspective that you haven't lived in. So of course, get help with it. Like you're not going to know exactly what's the green flags for BIPOC if you're not BIPOC. You're not going to know if you're not LGBTQIA+. You're not going to know if you're disabled. So it's okay to ask for like that insight. I feel like sometimes people also, a part of like the perfectionism and the hustle culture is like, well, I just need to know everything and I just need to do on my own. And then if I don't, then I'm failing. And it's like, no, you don't. You won't know exactly. It won't come to mind because you just have a different lived experience and positionality. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is such a word, a golden nugget right there. And goes back to that healing of that perfectionism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not having to have it all together, because that just keeps us pressed. So I guess I'm just a little bit more curious about the way you work with businesses. So do they get like a special treatment based on their needs and their size, or do you have kind of like a skeleton model of this is the basics that every business needs to have, and then from there we'll add, take away based on the business?
Yeah, the first few months is really centered on mindset. So it's
Okay.
like a particular way, like combating the perfectionism, combating like I call it bro business, like we just took from capitalism
A
of
word.
like
Nail on the head. Oh my God, yes.
yeah. Like talking about pain points. Like, why do we do pain points? Why do we exploit pain
Why?
points?
Why?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And so yeah, it's like more so deconstructing that because yeah, I just find a lot of businesses are like, wait, what? Like I've been told to do pain points like throughout, and it makes so much sense. And it's like, yeah, it does make sense because it's such great manipulation. Like it is. So combating that, kind of understanding to your positionality as an individual, and then how it plays into your business, and then getting into like the specifics of your business because it's just different for different people. I also think like not every business is supposed to serve everybody, and we should be okay with that, and also be
Truth.
honest and authentic with that. Like I made one of my most controversial posts that I've made that I've gotten the most like DMs from, but also really great conversations from, is when I said, if you're a business coach and the people that you primarily serve are white cis women, then you should just say that you're a business coach for white cis women, because the harm that you do the harm that you do when you get someone who is not a part of that identity and they see all the success and you're not honest about, okay, can I serve this person? Have I done the inner and out of work of making sure I could hold space and help this person succeed? And then you allow that person to invest, which is usually thousands of dollars in you. It's such a disservice. And I actually think very unethical. And it's okay to just say, I can only serve this type of people.
It is. It really
It's
is.
okay.
Call a spade at the end of the day.
Yeah. If you're not willing to do the actual active work of making sure that you can serve a various amount of people and identities, then you should just say who you can serve. And that's okay.
You just are reminding me of all these like discovery calls that I had with different business coaches, and I'm putting a big ass air quotes around that. And all of them, when I talked about how maybe I don't know if this program is for me because I am not really a person who has a lot of resources. I don't have a large network. I don't have people who have buckets of money to invest into my business. And they were all just like, well, I think that you can figure it out. And I'm like, what? What are you saying to me? What are you saying?
Mhm.
So yeah, necessary work, Nike.
It really is, because I feel, we've talked a lot about like trying to undo perfectionism. Like, how many people just can't say that they do have a limitation? And like, that's such just a good point to make about like the audience you're trying to serve, that like, call a spade a spade. If it's just a bunch of white people, then like at least say it. Like, don't try to pretend otherwise. I really like that, like, you use the word catalyst a lot, and a lot all over your page and your business, your podcast, all of those things. And I think that's a really good embodiment of what you are. Like, you're not afraid to say some really hard things that like, it's got to be stuff that like before you hit like post that you're like, okay, and like take it and swallow it and like know that you might get some pushback. Right on. I really applaud that, because that's something that's been a big topic in my life lately, of like just doing some things that go against the grain of some of the people in my personal circle that they don't care for. So yeah, right on from a fellow against the grainer.
Yeah, I really have been trying to embrace that I'm a disruptor the last year, because it's hard. But there's just something in me that I'm like, okay, I just have to say it. I don't know where it comes from. I think it's really ancestors, because again, like, I feel like my 10-year-old self would be like, what are you doing? Like, we didn't talk.
Right. Everyone's going to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that I'm just trying to embrace it. It is hard, but also I can't stop it right now.
That's true. Yep.
Yeah.
I feel that really hard right now. I'm definitely become even more the dude that says the things that people don't want to hear, but they need to. I'm here for it. I love this rise of that in this generation. So Nike, you are helping people, helping businesses. Who is helping you? Like, who are your teachers and your mentors? Besides
That's
the
a great
ancestors.
question.
Good question.
Well, I'm not working with anyone right now, because since I work in the school system, and since we were raised, well, not everyone, but I was raised in the school system, I took my summers off. So I'm like, okay, I'm looking new. But the first thing I did that I think really helped my business also too, even though it wasn't specifically business coaching, was I did somatic healing for a good 6 months.
Yes.
Yeah, it was really great. If you don't know what somatic healing is, for the listeners, it's really like connecting with your body and the different parts of your body, but also I focus on a lot of not ancestral, inner child work, and understanding the different parts that were showing up when I was triggered or when I was processing something. And I think that was really great. My teacher, her name is Leela Lee. She's a woman of color. And it was a great experience because she was a woman of color, and she's also a child of immigrants, because that intersectionality was just so amazing for me. I didn't have to constantly like teach as I was healing, which I find happens a lot when someone isn't intersectional or doesn't have the same understanding. Like, you have to teach them like, why you can't tell your African parents no. And they're like, just empower yourself. And you're like, you don't understand. There's layers to this.
Please.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like why you feel certain ways in certain spaces. So like that was such a great experience. And I hope to reconnect with her soon for fall. And then I also read a lot, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, but like the book that really helps me in my business, and just in this being in the spiritual space in general as a Black femme, was the book Do Better by Rachel Ricketts. I also had her on my podcast, and I was just like, it was so amazing. But I would say she's kind of like a mentor, not in the sense of like an actual personal mentor, but she like is so honest, especially when it comes to social media. And like she prioritizes rest and things like that. And so that's always inspiring to see when I just am scrolling on Instagram and I see a post, I'm like, you're right, Rachel, you are right. So just like from afar. And then within my business, I always talk about her, which I don't even know. She actually primarily works with, she says she's a sales and systems coach for women of color finance experts. And I'm not a finance expert, but we met in a group coaching that we did. And her name is Roma. On Instagram, she's FMC by Ro. And y'all, if your business is not automated yet, if it's not completely where you can just like let it be, then you need to sign up with Roma because she made my life so much easier. She taught me everything that I'm like, my first business coach should have taught me, but my first business coach was just like super racist and anti-Black and would tell me to just breathe. Oh, and also ableist. So that was a waste. But she taught me everything, and she always like also is so just, she's like, you don't need a VA. You do not need a VA. Just automate it. And I'm like, you're right. So
listen, I'm adding her to my list now.
Yes. So yeah, those are like what the people who right now, like I'm really like referencing back to and using the tools that they've given me, and would always invest in them in the future because they're just so amazing. And Roma's also women of color. Which I've been trying to just invest in women of color this year because it's just been a better experience.
Yeah, just because I feel that.
Yeah, no explanation needed, I would say. Man, I'm just over here like taking all these notes down, just trying to because you clearly give off like big business witch energy. So I love when we have people on here who have really sustainable things. Can we talk a little bit about your text message service? I like that it's the goddess text message. Work with your lineage. Tell us about that.
Oh, I actually am just finishing it this month. So
excellent. Well, never mind.
Yeah, it was honestly so great, but I think I'm just disconnecting with goddesses a little bit. I might do something in the future of like for people who want to always like more sustainable, like anti-racist thing. But they were great. They honestly were. You just get a message, empowering message every day from a goddess. But I think I'm just gonna switch it and it will be a empowering message from somewhere else.
Well, but I love that because on our last episode, we talked about how just business certainly evolves and there's certainly nothing wrong with that, because this was Magical Aspirations was something very different when it started off in my head than what it is now. And I do think it is important to acknowledge that evolution, no matter where it's at, personal, business, all together, that's right on. I support that.
Yes. This has been so beautiful of a conversation. And you are in your bag, sweetie. You are in your bag. Well, Reverend Raven and Elise, is there anything else that you want to ask Nike?
I don't think so. I'm just kind of sitting here soaking everything in, and I was being quiet because I'm looking up like Roma and everything that you're talking about, because I definitely need a business coach.
Oh yes, she's amazing.
Thank you for all of the knowledge that you've shared with us today. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh, I do want to mention that I do ancestral healing retreats that center and prioritize Black and Indigenous healing, but everyone, and I actually I think everyone should go. The last one I did was in June, and it was the most transformational and raw experience. There were actually more women of color than white women, which just instantly changed the energy. So stay tuned if you're interested, and I try to make my retreats more accessible as well.
Yes. So where can our listeners find you and sign up for newsletters and reminders and all of that?
Yeah, you can connect with me on Instagram. My IG is this Nike Aurea, NikeAurea. And then I usually post updates there. And then you could find my other links in my bio. I'm also on TikTok with the same username, but my TikTok is like, I don't know. The vibe is off right now.
I feel that. The vibes are weird over there.
Yeah. But yeah, you can connect with me there. And then my website is also www.nikeaurea.com, Nike Aurea. So,
And your podcast is Catalyst?
yes, I have a podcast called Catalyst. I just did a rename, but yeah, it's called Catalyst. I talk about all this stuff. And again, it's a space that centers Black and Indigenous healing.
Yes, I love it. Catalyst is definitely one of my favorite words, so I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for chatting with us today on this Sunday. We, of course, are going to leave all of Nike's information in the notes, and y'all make sure to go follow her, support her, invest in her, and spread the word. And with that, y'all have a beautiful day. Bye.
Thank you.
Stay magical.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Magical Aspirations. Be sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Magical Aspirations to keep up with the latest and the greatest from Annalisa, Adriana, and Reverend Raven, and to join in on the Magical Aspirations conversations. Come check out our website, magicalaspirations.com, to find bonuses from our guests, our Magical Aspirations blog, and to reach out to our magical hosts with questions, comments, reviews, or ideas for future episodes. We are so grateful for each and every one of you listening. Thank you again, and as always, stay true to your magic.